These old photos will change your perspective on the past. 1. A glimpse through time, unveiling hidden echoes of the 20th century. Step into the folds of forgotten time, where each frame whispers secrets of a world once untouched by modern limits. This is History in Focus, where the past lives again through stories both mesmerizing and surreal. Imagine a moment where history didn't live behind ropes or glass, but lay open to barefoot wanderers and dreamers. Such was the scene atop the Great Pyramid of Giza in the early 1900s. Back then, travelers climbed freely to the summit of the ancient wonder, basking in sunlight, sipping tea, and indulging in picnics with the Sahara stretching endlessly before them. It was an era before the weight of preservation locked these treasures behind strict regulation, and photographs from that time feel like scenes from an alternate universe, one where awe met accessibility. Fast forward to 1987, and we find ourselves high above Europe in the cockpit of a single-engine Cessna, piloted by 19-year-old Matthias Rust. What began as a teenager's peace mission would spiral into a Cold War embarrassment for the Soviet Union. Rust penetrated over 500 miles of restricted airspace, eventually landing dramatically near Red Square. His quiet descent revealed devastating weaknesses in Soviet air defense and became a symbolic crack in the iron grip of an empire. Shifting from sky to stone, the notorious 1962 escape from Alcatraz remains cloaked in speculation. With uncanny craftsmanship, inmates sculpted papier-mâché heads using glue, flesh-toned paint, and real human hair, fooling guards as they slipped into a dark maze of hand-dug tunnels. These hauntingly lifelike masks lay testament to desperate brilliance, and the fate of those who wore them is still debated across generations. In another engineering marvel, the thundering roar of Niagara Falls fell silent in 1969. For 6 surreal months, the American Falls were damned, revealing a dry, alien landscape littered with lost coins, long-forgotten relics, and 2 skeletal remains. This effort allowed engineers to inspect the crumbling bedrock and reinforce the safety of millions of yearly visitors, offering an eerie pause in the river's ancient song. Meanwhile, in a modest California town, 2 brothers launched a culinary revolution that would change the world's appetite. Richard and Maurice McDonald opened their namesake diner, selling 15-cent hamburgers and pioneering a kitchen model of speed and simplicity. The arrival of Ray Kroc in 1954 turned their vision into a worldwide empire, birthing the fast food culture we know today. Not all innovations were as edible. During the early 20th century, a strange and experimental firefighting suit emerged. Designed to constantly soak its wearer in jets of water, the suit aimed to shield firefighters from unbearable flames. Equipped with nozzles even on the helmet, this dripping armor marked a bold chapter in the ongoing quest to battle urban blazes with ingenuity. Let us journey further, not through what has been retold, but through what history almost forgot. 2. Echoes of influence and intrigue. Power paraded, plotted, and passed on. History, at its most haunting, reveals itself not only in grand declarations or battles won, but in moments where symbolism walks hand in hand with silent ambition, where images and glances conceal deeper truths than speeches ever could. Picture the summer of 1944, as Moscow's cobbled streets bore witness to a procession unlike any other, a parade not of celebration, but of conquest's aftermath. Over 57,000 captured German soldiers, worn and broken, were herded through the capital in what came to be known as the Parade of the Defeated. It followed the sweeping Soviet victory of Operation Bagration, which had decimated 28 Wehrmacht divisions and inflicted over 300,000 German casualties. The march became a living portrait of humiliation, crafted by Stalin to etch Soviet supremacy into the psyche of its people and enemies alike, a march less about movement and more about message. Across the Atlantic decades later, a different form of legacy took root, not with guns or uniforms, but with blueprints and property deeds. In 1970 New York, Fred Trump, a shrewd architect of post-war suburban expansion, stood beside his son Donald, overseeing rows of housing developments across Brooklyn. These low-cost homes, symbols of working-class prosperity, had cemented Fred's influence in the world of real estate. Young Donald, observant and increasingly driven, would soon move from sideline to center stage, absorbing both his father's tactics and ambitions, setting in motion a future steeped in skyscrapers and power plays. Yet influence in history is not always born in public view. Sometimes it wears the face of charm and deception. Olga Chekova, a glittering starlet in Nazi Germany and a favored guest in Hitler's inner circle, harbored a secret that could have altered the war's course. She was a Soviet spy. Entrusted with an assassination plot that reached the Führer's side, her double life embodied one of the most daring operations imagined by Soviet intelligence. But in a twist shrouded in mystery, Stalin abruptly canceled the plan, leaving the reasons buried in silence. Years later, in 1985, another quiet turning point emerged, not in espionage or warfare, but in diplomatic observation. A young Xi Jinping, then a junior Chinese official, stepped onto American soil in San Francisco as part of a study delegation. From the fog-covered expanse of the Golden Gate Bridge to exchanges with local leaders, this visit marked one of Xi's earliest encounters with Western systems, capitalism, and American society, a glimpse that would one day ripple through the corridors of global power. 3. Behind the curtain of time, beauty, deception, spectacle, and secrecy. Some chapters of history do not announce themselves with wars or revolutions. They slip through the cracks of daily life, hiding in salons, circus tents, or the shadows of distant towns. These moments, though quiet, shape the texture of the past in ways as enduring as battles. Imagine stepping into a beauty salon of the 1920s or 1930s, not to be soothed, but to be transformed. Beneath a towering metal contraption known as the permanent wave machine. With its web of cables, tubes, and metal rods that loomed over the client's head, the device appeared more suited to a laboratory than a place of leisure. Yet to the modern woman of the era, it offered the promise of glamour, long-lasting, structured curls, a symbol of sophistication and social elevation. The electric heat or steam that pulsed through those ominous coils was, in reality, a mark of innovation, ushering in a new age where science and style intersected in pursuit of beauty. At the edge of society's fascination with the unusual stood Stefan Bobrowski, better known to the world as Lionel the Lion-Faced Man. Born with hypertrichosis, a rare condition that caused thick hair to grow across his entire body, including his face, he turned his anomaly into art, captivating audiences from Berlin to America with his powerful presence and unexpected intellect. He could speak 5 languages fluently, and despite being paraded as a curiosity in circuses like Barnum and Bailey, Lionel refused to let his condition define him as a victim. He became a symbol of dignity beneath the mask of spectacle. While the world marveled at such individuals in plain sight, other operations flourished in shadows. During Prohibition, as the United States declared war on alcohol, smugglers responded with cunning. Trucks bearing harmless facades, produce deliveries, lumber shipments, household goods, became moving illusions. One of the most ingenious smuggling tactics involved wooden crates with hidden trap doors built to conceal hundreds of bottles of illicit liquor. Inspectors, often under pressure or outwitted by clever craftsmanship, failed to spot the deception. These secret compartments kept the underground alcohol trade alive and well, feeding speakeasies and private gatherings in defiance of law and moral panic. But secrecy reached its most chilling and extraordinary heights during World War II, when the quiet town of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, was built from nothing into a restricted city overnight. Entirely off the map and hidden from the public, it was created for one purpose: to fuel the Manhattan Project and produce materials for the atomic bomb. In this guarded space, where even neighbors knew not to ask questions, billboards were erected not to sell products, but to instill silence. What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. These haunting words hung over the workers like a veil, a constant reminder that the history they were helping shape had to remain invisible until the moment the world was forever changed by its consequences. From salon chairs wrapped in wires to circus stages bathed in wonder, from the hollow knock of smuggler crates to the silent hills of Oak Ridge, these fragments of time remind us that history is not always told in loud declarations. Sometimes it's built in whispers, illusions, and the quiet work of those who never knew how far their story would reach. 4. Whispers, energy, and icons, secrets, beliefs, and stardom. In the veiled corners of history, where silence was law and wonder often blurred with myth, stories unfold that stir both disbelief and fascination. During World War II, in the secret city of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, messages etched on billboards and echoed in daily routines served as warnings cloaked in urgency. Loose talk helps the enemy, so let's keep our mouths shut. These slogans weren't suggestions. They were orders draped in patriotic duty, reinforcing the unyielding need for secrecy in a place where atomic power was being quietly born. A decade later, another kind of invisible force captured public imagination, the supposed life-giving energy known as orgone. Promoted by psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich in the 1950s, the orgone accumulator was a metallic box where users would sit, believing they were absorbing vital energy with healing powers. Though marketed as a scientific breakthrough, Reich's theory never gained empirical support and was ultimately discredited, but the allure of hidden forces remained. Hidden truths also marked the early life of a girl named Norma Jean Baker, who at just 16 stood at the edge of adulthood in a quiet wedding photo beside James Dougherty in 1942. Before she was Marilyn Monroe, the world's archetype of Hollywood beauty, she was a vulnerable teen whose marriage was arranged to prevent her from being sent to an orphanage. Her transformation from anonymity to legend would crescendo years later in 1955 as she filmed the famous scene over a New York subway grate for the 7-Year Itch. Surrounded by flashing cameras and a captivated crowd, her billowing white dress became more than a costume. It became a cultural emblem, capturing the magnetic contradiction between innocence and allure that defined her legacy. 5. Moments of defiance, illusion, and legacy, the faces that shaped a century. There are moments when the lens of history captures not just a scene, but a pulse, the raw breath of defiance, illusion, or consequence frozen in time. On June 5, 1989, a rare low-angle photograph immortalized a solitary figure standing motionless on Chang'an Avenue in Beijing, halting a column of tanks the morning after the Tiananmen Square massacre. Known only as Tank Man, his silent act of resistance became one of the most enduring symbols of individual courage against military oppression, a visual echo of dignity confronting force. Decades earlier, in the rolling fields of Texas, power took on a more theatrical form. President Lyndon B. Johnson delighted in surprising guests with his amphibious car, a German-made vehicle capable of floating on water. With a mischievous grin, he would speed toward a lake, feign brake failure, and plunge in, leaving his passengers gasping in panic before bursting into laughter. Humor, it seemed, was another tool of command. But levity gave way to tension in 1969 when the U.S. government conducted a televised military draft lottery during the Vietnam War. Capsules containing birth dates were drawn to determine who would be sent to fight, a mechanical process that sparked emotional turmoil, protests, and a wave of resistance across a divided nation. The weight of service also fell heavily on General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of a president and a commander himself. In July 1944, he was temporarily buried in Normandy after leading the 4th Infantry Division ashore on D-Day, the only general to do so. Despite chronic health issues, he insisted on fighting alongside his men, dying of a heart attack soon after, his courage etched forever in the soil of France. These varied portraits, from protest to pageantry, from comedy to sacrifice, remind us that history is shaped not only by policies and battles, but by moments where character meets fate. 6. Icons, outlaws, and unlikely legends. Power, performance, and cultural threads. History doesn't always whisper from royal halls or echo through battlefields. It sometimes growls from courtroom benches, clatters across railway tracks, or flows through wooden barrels on the front lines. In a gripping moment of justice, infamous mobster Al Capone stood flanked by lawyers, his face composed as he faced tax evasion charges that would ultimately dismantle his criminal empire. Inside the courtroom gallery, spectators, some suspected mob affiliates, shielded their identities under wide-brimmed hats, a silent ballet of fear and defiance. This trial, though devoid of the violence that marked his reign, symbolized the downfall of organized crime's most notorious figure during Prohibition. Yet amid these shadowy dealings, a very different kind of legend emerged far across the globe. In the 1880s, a South African baboon named Jack earned fame and respect for serving as the assistant to a disabled railway signalman in Uitenhage. With uncanny precision, Jack operated signal levers and handled station duties without error for nearly a decade. So impressive was his work that he was officially hired, salaried, and given an employee number, an extraordinary testament to trust beyond species. The era of Prohibition would come to a close with a collective national exhale on December 5, 1933, as Americans flooded Chicago bars to celebrate the repeal of the alcohol ban. After 13 years of underground trade, smuggling, and speakeasy culture, legal spirits flowed once again, signaling not just relief, but the symbolic end of an age fueled by resistance and lawlessness. On European soil during the chaos of World War I, French soldiers received more than bullets and bread. They were shipped barrels of wine directly to the front, including at Gallipoli. For the French, wine was more than a drink. It was a lifeline, a cultural comfort believed to bolster morale and soothe the psychological strain of war. Strength, too, wore many forms in the early 20th century, as seen in the figure of George Hackenschmidt, the Russian Lion, a pioneer in both professional wrestling and bodybuilding. Known for developing the precursor to the modern bench press, Hackenschmidt's training methods and philosophical approach to strength made him not only a champion in sport, but a foundational figure in physical culture whose influence remains visible in gyms to this day. From courtrooms to trenches, from animals at work to human feats of power, these stories weave together a rich tapestry of determination, identity, and endurance across time. Seven. From Quakes to Controversies, echoes of power, belief, and identity across a changing century. Not all revolutions erupt with fire and fury. Some begin with a quiet tremor in the earth, the whispered comfort of a priest's prayer, or the symbolic gleam carved into a granite eye. History is not only written in treaties or carved into monuments, it pulses through forgotten rallies, defiant protests, sacred rituals, and the roar of a lion behind studio lights. During World War I, amid the mud and thunder of the Western Front, it was common for military chaplains to perform blessings over planes and air crews before each mission. These priests offered confessions, last rites, and words of comfort to soldiers standing on the edge of mortality. Faith, in those moments, became a shield as real as steel. Not long before, the earth itself had become an enemy. In 1906, the San Andreas Fault tore through California, its power captured in a photo of a deep rupture splitting the ground, a raw, visible wound caused by one of the deadliest earthquakes in American history. Over 3,000 lives were lost, and much of San Francisco was reduced to ruin, marking a moment when nature's strength overshadowed human architecture. Yet just decades later, another gathering would shake the foundations of morality and democracy. This time, inside Madison Square Garden in New York. On February 20th, 1939, 20,000 people attended a Nazi rally hosted by the German-American Bund. Swastikas waved alongside American flags, and George Washington's image was used to legitimize fascist ideology, only months before the world plunged into war. While dark ideologies spread, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was shaping a different kind of legacy, cinematic. The roar that introduced MGM films became one of the most recognized sounds in the world, recorded using real lions, with Leo, the most famous, filmed in 1957. That moment of primal power welcomed audiences into dreamscapes for generations. Meanwhile, Marianne Bevan's life unfolded far from silver screens. After developing acromegaly, a disorder that caused extreme facial changes, she was crowned in a contest as the ugliest woman. But beneath the cruel title was a woman of courage, a nurse and mother of 4 who supported her family through public exhibitions after her husband's death, becoming a powerful figure of resilience and grace in the face of public scorn. In the 1980s, political sentiment reached even small corners of protest, as a Canadian gas station in Ontario refused to serve Soviet-made Lada cars during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The handwritten sign, "We will not fuel Ladas until the Soviets withdraw," became a small but fierce declaration of Western solidarity with Afghan resistance. Back in Europe, in the smoldering aftermath of World War II, Soviet soldiers walked through Berlin reading Germany's surrender aloud. Residents emerged from shattered buildings, balconies, and windows to hear the words that ended the Third Reich. It was a moment both heavy and liberating, one history could not ignore. In 1959, the Cold War took a domestic turn in the famed kitchen debate, where U.S. Vice President Richard Nixon clashed with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev at an American home exhibition in Moscow. Nixon pointed to a washing machine as proof that any American could enjoy luxuries, a metaphor for capitalist superiority in the heart of a geopolitical rivalry. That same spirit of innovation had once been embodied by Henry Ford, who in 1896 drove his gasoline-powered quadricycle, an invention with 4 bicycle wheels and a tiny engine. Its success sparked a revolution in manufacturing and gave birth to the Ford Motor Company, forever transforming global transportation. Across the granite face of South Dakota, the monumental carving of Mount Rushmore began in 1927 and continued for 14 grueling years. With over 400 workers using hammers, chisels, and dynamite, every detail of the 4 presidents, including their gleaming stone eyes, was sculpted by hand. The image became not just a symbol of American leadership, but of relentless craftsmanship and human ambition. Not far away, in another realm of aspiration, the original Hollywoodland sign was erected in 1923 to sell real estate, never intended to become a global icon. By 1949, its last 4 letters were removed, leaving behind a single word that now conjures dreams, films, fame, and the long shadows of those who built it. Each of these moments, whether scarred in earth or shaped in stone, wrapped in prayer or fueled by protest, reveals how the 20th century unfolded through acts both humble and grand. Everyone a thread in the vast, strange tapestry we call history. 8. Fragments of power and legacy. Stone, sound, faith, and shadows. History's imprint is not only carved into monuments or echoed in speeches, it lingers in iron fallen from the sky, in the flicker of controversial photographs, and in the ink of political pacts that redefined entire nations. The Willamette meteorite, discovered in Oregon in the early 20th century, is more than a celestial relic. Weighing approximately 15 tons and composed mostly of iron and nickel, it is the largest meteorite found in the United States and the 6th largest in the world. Though it landed thousands of years ago, it holds deep spiritual significance for local indigenous tribes who regard it as sacred. Now displayed at the American Museum of Natural History, the meteorite stands as a bridge between cosmic mystery and cultural memory. Decades later, in 1974, another kind of storm stirred controversy when Mick Jagger, lead singer of the Rolling Stones, was photographed with Leni Riefenstahl, the filmmaker once famed for crafting Nazi propaganda under Hitler's regime. Though the meeting took place long after World War II, Riefenstahl's political past cast a long shadow over the image, igniting debate on legacy, art, and accountability. In 1929, a different alliance made history as Mussolini signed the Lateran Pacts with the Vatican, officially recognizing the Holy See as a sovereign entity. The deal secured Catholicism as Italy's state religion and aligned the fascist regime with the Church, blending political ambition with divine authority and fortifying Mussolini's grip on the Italian people. These events, though vastly different in time and tone, reveal the strange intersections of belief, power, symbolism, and controversy that shape the story of human history. 9. Time's unblinking lens, a tapestry of defiance, mystery, memory, and mortality. There are moments when time pauses, not in silence, but in stillness captured by a camera, a whisper of memory, or the curve of an iron lung. History often marches with spectacle, but it also lives in fading eyes, a raised protest sign, or the last breath of a vanished species. It lingers in the quiet dignity of a dying rock star in his garden, as seen in one of the final photos of Freddie Mercury in 1991. Frail, yet composed in floral shirt and jeans, cloaked not in spotlight, but in serenity, sheltered among flowers and trusted friends, where the world could not intrude. In a different form of Unveiling, U.S. Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge revealed to the United Nations a gift from 1945, a wooden plaque of the Great Seal of the United States, concealing a Soviet listening device that had hung undetected in the American Moscow embassy for 7 years. The exposure of this Cold War relic became a symbol of invisible warfare, deep distrust, and the relentless shadows of espionage. Centuries earlier, but frozen just as hauntingly, a loaf of bread charred by Vesuvius in AD 79 still bears the day's scars. The blackened crust and scoring lines, a tragic relic of Pompeii's ordinary life, interrupted in an instant by the wrath of nature. Just as history captures stillness, it erupts with motion, as with paparazzo Ron Galella, who, after being assaulted by Marlon Brando in 1973, wore a football helmet while tailing him through city streets, an absurd yet real defense against a celebrity's fury and the price of uninvited intimacy. From defiant individuals to indigenous warriors, Joe Medicine Crow, last war chief of the Crow Nation, stood beside Barack Obama after receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His deeds during World War II fulfilled ancient warrior rites, stealing enemy horses, taking prisoners, and fighting bravely, preserving honor both as soldier and as the voice of a culture. Across the economic chasm of the Great Depression, makeshift communities rose in Central Park and cities across the U.S., dubbed Hoovervilles, named in bitter satire of President Herbert Hoover. These fragile shelters of tar and timber housed thousands who had been swept aside by collapse, their stories written not in policy but in hunger and dust. In another era, 4 young men stepped onto a simple crosswalk outside Abbey Road Studios, and in 6 clicks of a shutter, the Beatles created a visual icon to match their sound. The 1969 photo, casual yet immortal, would symbolize not just an album but a generational mood. Rebellion softened with rhythm, fame wrapped in effortless cool. Elsewhere, presidential power collided with personal vulnerability as Lyndon B. Johnson leaned over a recorder in 1968, listening intently to a tape sent from Vietnam by his son-in-law. In that instant, the war was no longer strategy or statistics, but the trembling voice of a loved one, a father's heart caught in geopolitical tides. Contrasting this gravity, Russia's Boris Yeltsin electrified a crowd in 1996 by dancing to rock music during a public concert in Rostov. Dressed in white shirt and tie, his erratic swaying delighted the audience and captured the surreal humor of politics in post-Soviet transition. Earlier in time, a man named Edward Llewellyn stood proud beside a 425 lb black sea bass he'd caught off Catalina Island in 1903, an image of sporting triumph during a golden age of American leisure when strength met patience at sea. In quieter brilliance, 8-year-old Samuel Reshevsky sat across from rows of chess masters in France, a tiny prodigy besting them all. Born in Poland, raised in America, he would grow into a grandmaster whose mind defied age, geography, and expectation. The raw energy of history is sometimes brutal, as in the ring when Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear in 1997, a moment of uncontrolled violence that shocked the sporting world and branded the rematch forever in infamy. Equally disturbing, but with chilling cruelty, Soviet serial killer Andrei Chikatilo grinned from inside a courtroom cage in 1992, as families of his victims watched the man responsible for more than 50 murders. The cage wasn't metaphorical. It was built to shield him from those who might have torn him apart. Catastrophe-shaped reform in 1911 when the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York City burned, trapping young immigrant women inside locked rooms and forcing others to leap from windows. The fire killed 146 and sparked outrage that led to sweeping labor laws and safety reforms, proving that even flames can ignite justice. Timothy Treadwell, known as the Grizzly Man, believed he could coexist with wild bears in Alaska's Katmai National Park. His devotion led to summer after summer documenting his animal companions until 2003, when a bear killed him and his partner. His death became a cautionary tale of blurred boundaries between awe and delusion. In Brazil, 1979, a young girl refused to shake the hand of President João Figueiredo in public, a silent act of resistance at the close of a brutal dictatorship. Her gesture rippled through the nation, a small defiance that spoke volumes in a country emerging from repression. Movie magic, too, plays tricks with reality, such as the Titanic set, which was built upside down to better simulate passengers falling as the ship tilted. A behind-the-scenes feat that gave tragic authenticity to one of cinema's most harrowing sequences. Far more real and revolutionary was Ahmed Ali Çeliktin, possibly the first black military pilot who flew for the Ottoman Empire in World War I. His rise through the skies shattered racial boundaries long before civil rights caught up on the ground. In the 1950s, hope came sealed in glass vials as a nurse held up a newspaper declaring vaccine victory beside a child in an iron lung. The polio vaccine was a scientific miracle that turned fear into celebration and saved millions from paralysis. In 1980, Terry Fox, who had lost his leg to cancer, began a marathon across Canada, running on sheer determination and a prosthetic limb. He ran nearly a marathon a day, raising more than $24 million, leaving footprints etched in national memory. The last Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, was photographed before its death in 1936, a symbol of extinction by human hand. Today, efforts to revive the species with genetics echo a longing to undo damage time has sealed. In his last public appearance, Mao Zedong, aged and ailing, sat slouched in an armchair in 1976, surrounded by books and aides. His frailty marked the quiet end of a ruler whose policies reshaped 1 billion lives. A young Ronald Reagan once stood on a quiet riverbank in Illinois, rescuing swimmers as a lifeguard. Long before the presidency, he had already learned to carry others, one arm at a time. Queen Genepil of Mongolia, the last queen before the fall of the monarchy, wore ornate jewelry and ceremonial headdress in a portrait taken shortly before communism erased her world, a final echo of a dynasty lost to revolution. On a snowy hill in 1991, Arnold Schwarzenegger and George W. Bush laughed like boys, sledding together in a photo that felt far from politics, but closer to the simplicity of shared joy. War crimes were judged when Joseph Tiso, president of Nazi-aligned Slovakia, stood trial in 1947 and claimed to remember nothing of the deportations he oversaw. Justice remembered for him, and he was sentenced to death. Florence Thompson, immortalized in the migrant mother photo of the Depression, later held the iconic portrait of herself. Once anonymous, her face became the symbol of a generation's pain and perseverance. In 1963, a 21-year-old Bernie Sanders was arrested in Chicago during a protest against school segregation. Handcuffed and fined, the young activist planted the roots of a lifelong political path. Actress Anita Ekberg stepped outside with a bow and arrow in Rome, confronting paparazzi who had hounded her for days, a scene both cinematic and symbolic, a woman reclaiming her privacy with elegance and force. On a balcony in Poland, Nazi commander Amon Guth stood with a rifle, looking out over Plazow concentration camp. Decades later, that same image would haunt audiences in Schindler's List, turning cold reality into filmic memory. Leonid Brezhnev and Erich Honecker locked lips in a public kiss of socialist solidarity, captured forever on Berlin's infamous wall. Their embrace, awkward, symbolic, orchestrated, would one day be mocked, but it once spoke volumes about political allegiance. And finally, Britain's most dangerous prisoner, Charles Bronson, is seen flanked by guards in high-security gear. His legacy is not of freedom or reform, but of a man whose name became synonymous with institutional violence, isolation, and notoriety carved into concrete walls. Through each of these stories, tender, tragic, bold, or bizarre, flows the same current. The relentless pulse of being human in a world always watching, recording, and remembering. 10. Footprints in Forgotten Dust. Stories of ingenuity, resistance, and vision. In the hidden folds of history lie the quiet revolutions, those born not of kings or battles, but of grit, invention, and the determined hands of people who refused to be forgotten. These are the stories not found in headlines, but in stitches of reused fabric, the carved lines of a dime, the whisper of wind beneath early wings. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, when hunger stood at every doorstep and money was no longer the measure of worth, children wore dresses made from flour sacks. The sacks, often printed with floral or geometric patterns, became lifelines for struggling families who transformed them into clothing with nothing but scissors, thread, and resilience. These dresses told a story not just of poverty, but of resourceful love in desperate times. In another overlooked chapter, Selma Burke, an African-American sculptor, was commissioned in 1944 to create a portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Her bas relief, crafted with precision and depth, would become the model for the image of Roosevelt still found on the U.S. dime today. And yet, for decades, her name was buried beneath layers of official silence, her impact uncredited in the currency of national memory. Along the shores of Brighton, England in 1896, a surreal machine known as the Pioneer, or Daddy Longlegs, walked through the sea. It was a towering, electric-powered seaside tram that glided on iron legs along submerged rails, carrying passengers above the tide like a creature from science fiction. Though its run ended in 1901 due to storm damage, it remains a symbol of Victorian-era imagination. In 1909, Wilbur Wright circled the Statue of Liberty in flight, a moment where the new sky-bound dreams of humankind saluted the towering figure of freedom. His daring journey over New York Harbor was not just a feat of aviation, it was a declaration that the sky was no longer unreachable. But while some soared, others hid. A covert photograph in Argentina revealed Walter Cushman, a former SS officer living under a false identity. Exposed decades later by journalist Alfredo Serra, he was wanted for war crimes, including the execution of Jews and Polish intellectuals. Though arrested, he died in 1986 before extradition. Across the ocean, another woman was defying barriers, Emma Lillian Todd, the first woman to design an airplane. A self-taught inventor, she built detailed models and, with financial support from Olivia Sage, constructed a full-sized aircraft in 1910. Though it never flew, Todd's work placed her among the earliest dreamers of flight, and she used her platform to champion science education for women and children. These lives, these moments, though scattered across continents and decades, are threads of a shared human tapestry. threads of courage, vision, resistance, and invention that deserve to be remembered, honored, and shared. If these stories moved you, if they sparked a sense of wonder or reflection, help keep history alive. Like, share, and subscribe to History in Focus so these echoes of the past continue to reach the future.